I wonder if you could do like you could train yourself to like whenever you get the urge to do that, do you like flip it with like if you get the urge to, I don't know, like watch porn or something. It's like as soon as you get that urge, it's like fuck that, and you go like watch something else. So like if you're on your video, like instead of like is there like a term for that?
The Yes, there is. Let me look it up because that's a big Tony Robbins thing, actually. Keep going.
Is it?
I'm gonna try and look up what it is.
Because like I think I feel like this is on a roundabout way of avoiding procrastination because sometimes what we deem as hard work is just like cover up for procrastination. Like if you were just to sit there watching hours on hours of Adobe Pro videos, like I don't think that's a bad use of your time, but like what's the net gain out of that? You're going to retain maybe 10% of it, but you never really did anything with it. But like throughout that whole time, if it's like if you watch one video and then you're like, oh, like I notice so there's got to be some kind of training that we have done over the years from like being kids, like when you get some kind of urge, you act on it really quick, right? Like, you know what I mean? So like as you're going through this, I don't know if this is really on topic with anything we're talking about, but I just wonder if there's a way to train your mind to like, oh, I noticed I want to watch YouTube reels on how to make better YouTube reels. As soon as you get that urge, you're like, no, and you go do the thing you know you're supposed to do.
Yeah,
I don't know what
I know exactly what you're talking about.
like James Clear, like kind of is like almost like a form is building a habit,
Yep.
like but almost like the inverse. Like you're building a habit, but you're also breaking. You're not like I'm in my head. This makes a lot of sense, but when I say it out loud, I don't know if it does.
No, it makes total sense. And I am just like, just really neuro linguistic programming. That's what it is.
That's what that is.
NLP.
Fuck, I was talking
Yes.
about it like yesterday. I guess I don't even know what it means.
Well, maybe that's not exactly what it is, but that's a big Tony Robbins thing, neuro linguistic programming. But in his book, Unlimited Power, I think that's the book. That exact thing, dude, it's crazy. Take chewing your fingernails, for example. He will run people through mental exercises where they will, I don't want to get it wrong. I'm going to reread this section, make sure I get it right. But he will run them through mental exercises where they will imagine whatever the trigger is that causes them to want to chew on their fingernails, whether it's being nervous or being bored or something like that. He'll put them in that mental state and then he'll have them picture chewing on their fingernails. Like they go into the state, he has them picture chewing on their fingernails, and then he has them picture doing something else productive. And he runs through a cycle where he creates that trigger state. And then he has the image of chewing on their fingernails and the image of something being productive. And he has them imagine the fingernail image and then the productivity image. And he has them quickly swap in your head. You imagine either the productive one overtaking the fingernail one or this one burning and this one coming to light or whatever. And sometimes he'll attach it to a sound. He'll have the person actually get in a state of boredom or whatever, imagine chewing their fingernails and then saying whoosh, and then imagining doing the productive thing. And if they do that enough, it creates this trigger and feedback loop in their brain to where they have that trigger, they feel bored, anxious, nervous, whatever. They feel the urge to go chew their fingernails, but then immediately their mind switches in the productive thing. So that urge for the fingernails then gets put on the productive thing. And he claims he's helped thousands of people stop bad habits just doing that.
Really?
But that's something I've been really curious about too, for sure, because especially training Comet, this is another. I was thinking about making a YouTube video on this actually. And I have a really good title too that I'm excited about. I'll save that for a second. But the way dogs learn is called classical conditioning. And the one dog trainer I follow has this, calls it the 3-term contingency. Lots of random words nobody's going to care about when they listen to this. But essentially, you have a scenario or an environment or a trigger, and then you have a response to that. And then you're either reinforced or punished for that response.
Right.
And then the next time you face that scenario or trigger, you choose your response based on what you were reinforced for or punished. Mosey talks about this a lot too. But for Comet, for whatever reason, when dogs walk by, that's the scenario, he just barks his freaking head off. And so the act of barking is reinforcing for him, and then the dog goes away. So that reinforces that the next time that happens, he chooses that behavior. But if I sit there and I'm out there with him and I have his little prong collar on, which like hurts him, like pinches him, when I pull on it, the dog walks by, he starts barking, and I freaking yank that thing and it just pinches him. Then the next time, he's less likely to do that. You do that enough times, then that trigger happens. He chooses a different response, and then I reward him for that. That's a million words, but this is actually a really exciting topic.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. It sounds like what Mosey talks about too, when like not only for like employee retention, but also like prospects too. Like when they either sign up for a program and or like sign up for a call, giving some immediate reward, whatever that might be, just to register some type of positive feedback loop.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what does he say? Like, give a quick win early, whatever that might be.
As quick as possible. Him and Layla's recent content on training their employees has been pretty focused on that positive reinforcement and that exact concept of reinforcing behaviors you want to have happen, and they don't necessarily punish or they don't necessarily punish behaviors, but they extinguish behaviors, and that they either don't address them or they won't positively enforce things.
I wonder if that notion like debunks the point of like PIPs, like a performance improvement plan. Like if you have a failing rep who is just obviously not putting up numbers, which probably means they're doing the wrong thing consecutively. Chances are, if you put them on some type of like PIP, what's the first thing they're going to do? Like ramp activity, probably do more of something, right? But if they're just constantly going through this loop of ramping activity and getting that enforcement loop, like what Comet's doing when a dog walks by, like you feel like that's just a recipe for disaster for whatever rep that is about to go into. So if you have a failing SDR who's making 200 calls a day and you put him on a PIP, he's probably going to try and make 300 calls a day because he's feeling like he's not working hard enough. But he's just reinforcing negative habits more than he already was. Instead of, when it comes to employee retention and morale, looking at, I don't know, looking at the root cause. Right? I guess it's even like a personal thing too. You could look at, I don't know, I never like really applied conditional. What was it? Conditional
Classical conditioning is
classical.
the base broad term.
Classical conditioning.
But that's a really good point because it's dependent upon what you're reinforcing. And it's really prevalent with Comet too. I have to be really careful with what I reinforce and or punish, because there are times where I don't want him to jump on me or other people, but I do want him to run over to me when I tell him to come over here. So when I say come here and he runs over to me, that's a positive thing. That's what I want him to do. And I want to reinforce that. But if immediately after he jumps on me and then I reinforce at that point, I'm reinforcing the jumping and not necessarily the thing that I want him to do.
Right.
And that plays out in sales too. There's I've read this a couple different places, but with closing techniques, that plays out really prevalently in sales of when a rep potentially uses a horrible closing technique, or maybe pressure somebody into a sale, or just uses some bad sales technique and they get the sale, that reinforces to them to do that in the future, even though that was the wrong thing to do. So that's why a lot of sales practices are negative practices, because you get reinforced when you close sales that way. And the sale might have just closed anyway,
Right.
or you might have actually hurt the sale, but it's still closed. But because it closed and because you use that technique, now you're reinforced to use it again in the future.
That's pretty crazy.
It is crazy, huh?
I never really thought about that.
Like the hard closes, the assumed closes, stuff like that. The data suggests it doesn't really work in a strategic selling environment. This is from Spin Selling, that book. They did a bunch of research on it, and it works slightly better. You get a slight uplift in sales if you use it in low ticket sales, because people, it's like a $10 thing. It's easier just to buy the thing that you kind of want than it is to combat the salesman and get pissed off.
Right.
But in strategic sales, salespeople that have used hard closes and assumed closes and ended sales calls with, so when are we signing this thing? Or, so can I put you on the books, or some sort of hard assumed close? It actually really hurts sales. But the few times that it has worked, or for the reps that are new to the scene and were told to use that technique and they use it the first time and it works because the sale is just going to happen already, they are reinforced to continually do that over and over.
Think about it too in like sports, baseball. Like if you were, I mean, same concepts essentially, depending on which didn't really do. But
Exact same concept. You roll over through the 6-hole and you get a hit. You're reinforced to do that the next time, even though that's a horrible swing.
Or like if your coach tells you, like, hey, you're not performing, like if you don't do so and so this season, like I'm gonna take your scholarship away, whatever it might be. Like you're gonna go into the cage and work on your shitty mechanics that you've been doing for, your last 50 games or 150 at bats. Probably gonna reinforce that bad habit already. But
Yep.
you think you're focusing on the right thing, which is working hard, and that hard work will reward you. But it's like, just because you're working hard doesn't mean that you're working hard on the right thing. That's crazy. I never fucking applies to dogs. Who would have thought?